Yeah, this is a good idea. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So we can do something similar, you mean? Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, this is a good idea. Yeah, and usually this account is, let's say, easier to write because it's about your research. So it's more difficult with anyone who you have to look at all the papers that you have. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's very large, very, yeah, very good. Sí, sí, tant. Tens un boli, si no sí, sí, sí. Va, sí, ja
Que no calia.
No, perquè amb el 80% ja donem l'assistència per...
No cal que farem les preguntes i tot això. D'acord, moltes gràcies.
Sí, sí.
Okay, so maybe we can start. Just first of all, let me tell you that someone tell me that the voice is not well recorded when I use the wireless microphone. So this is why I'm coming back here, because it seems that it's the way the voice is recorded, so it can be followed by other people by streaming. Okay, so let's do it from here. And I don't know, but someone of you, I mean, whose name is Iker. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Iker. Iker sent me this example, which is also very funny. So this is a paper in Scientific Reports, so this journal from the Nature Group. And you see, in principle, it's a nice picture. You have the monkey here, this the sheet here of the monkey, and okay, what the experiments did with this is more or less explained here. However, when you amplify this sheet by something like 40 times or something like that, more or less, you get this picture. And this is you see the face of a well-known man, the president of the United States at the moment. Anyway, I think it's interesting. It's a joke, but still, I'm sure that the editor for sure now knows, and I'm sure that he's not happy about that. But anyway, it's probably not a good idea, because then if you want to send another paper to this journal, maybe the editor is not happy with you. And anyway, but it's interesting example of some figure. So thank you again. Okay, so now let's move. Well, we were discussing this. Yeah, sorry. We were discussing, we finished here, if I remember correctly, last day. So now let's go to here. And, okay, so we have basically in scientific writing, we have two tenses, which are the present and past. Of course, you can use also future and conditional and whatever, but these are the most important. And there are general rules. Again, this kind of rules can be broken quite easily. Yeah? It's not that you are forced to do that, but this is more or less what you should follow, but okay, not necessarily. Yeah? So if you have established information, this is, and the aims, also the objective, this is in present tense. And this is an example. Fluorines are a new allotropic form of carbon. So this is in present tense. If you have introduction, discussion, and conclusion, in general, in most of the cases, present perfect. But okay, it combines different verbs, because if the introduction you discuss some established information, you will use the present tense. But in many cases, you will use the present perfect. So previous studies have used something, have employed some method or whatever. Method and result section, usually past tense. So calculations were carried out with using, or experiments were done, something. Presentation of data, so we are now in the results. Present tense, so result in table 1 shows that or point out. So, okay, so results in past tense, but if you discuss the data in the results, which is something that you will do, you will use present tense. So it's a combination at the end, but more or less you can follow these rules. And also attribution of information to someone else's work, so usually past tense. Repeated all, studied something. So this is more or less the main tenses that we are going to use in scientific writing. But you will find, if you look at any paper, you will find that it's not always followed these recommendations. And you can break the rules also if you want. But okay, this is more or less what should be done. And then there is this wordiness. Wordiness means to use more words than needed. Remember that we want something short, brief, direct to the point, easy to understand, so not complicated. So in many cases you can make sentences short. For instance, instead of a number of, you can use many. Instead of based on the fact that, you can use because. Instead of first of all, you can use simply first. For the purpose of, just for. In order to, you can, in general, you can omit in order to and keep the two, just the two. If you have due to the fact that, you can use due to or because during the time that, you can use while in the month of May, just in May. It is interesting to note. So there are many cases that you can make shorter sentences. If this is the case, in principle, this is something that is quite recommended. Try to do it. And there is this website with many of these examples of worthiness. So you can maybe go there, and you will see that there are many. Let me see. Yeah, this is, by the way, this is from the University of Vic, and they have listed many of these sentences that can make shorter. Yeah. So here you have with A, absolutely essential. I mean, you can delete absolutely. Above all else, you can simply delete that or aforementioned, and well, there are many. So this is just for A, so then for B and so on. Yeah? So just, okay, maybe you can look a little bit about all these groups of words or sentences that can make shorter, and try to keep your writing as short as possible and focused as possible. Oh no, sorry. So, okay. Oops. Okay, so we should be able to state a simple idea simply. Yeah? Sentence structure, subject, verb, object, complements. This is the best sentences. Usually the ones that are very clear. Better if they are short, but if you can also use long sentences. You can combine short and long sentences. This is not a problem, but the long sentence should be clear. So there should be a way. I mean, it should be written in a way that someone that reads them, it's clear for the reader. So usually the best writers combine both, combine long and short sentences. If we have, if the sentence is probably too long, then okay, think about the possibility to cut the sentences into two, to divide the sentence into two or something like that. Avoid using nouns as adjective. Okay, this is something that is quite easy, is found many times in scientific literature. For instance, this ATP formation, it's better you use formation of ATP. So this is a noun. So it's better to put it that way, rather than use this noun as if it was an adjective, but it is not. So better to put formation of ATP or reaction product, better use product of the reaction. Okay. But still, it's a simple recommendation, because you see many papers making this kind of sentences and using nouns as adjective. Okay, so it's not a big problem, let's say, but it's better to do it that way. Do not use extra words. We should avoid wordiness. A sentence is like a machine. It has a job to do. An extra word in a sentence is like a sock in a machine. This is what Annie Dillard writes in this note for young writers. I would say that this is for science, but this is general, even for novels or something like that. So a sentence is like a machine. It has a job to do. Okay. You have to try to make the sentence so that they make the job that we want them to do. Okay, other things, for instance, these two sentences, I mean, okay, for URB, which was founded in 1992, the URB, which was founded in 1992, is the University of Southern Catalonia. And you can write the same, founded in 1992, the URB is the University of Southern Catalonia. Both are fine. There is no problem with the two sentences, but the second is shorter. So, the shorter, the better. So this is something, prepositional phrases. We have commented that, so you can write ecosystems can be managed to limit the effect of global warming, or ecosystem can be managed to limit the global warming effect. So this, again, global warming is kind of noun if you want. Well, global would be an adjective, but global warming is a kind of noun. So you can put the two ways. Probably this one is better, especially if you want to put more emphasis in the global warming. If you want to put emphasis here, so it's better to put it that way. If not, this is fine. I mean, it's not that it's wrong. It's simply better. So rework your paper several times, eliminate unnecessary words, avoid wordiness and repetition, look for good organization and flow. So it should be, well, the flow of ideas should be clear, and in general, I mean, let's say it's good that the paper, I mean, keeps a tone uphill in some way. So avoid, for instance, putting some, let's say, additional final result or something like that at the end, because okay, then the tone of the paper downs, and okay, it's not the best way to finish a paper. So probably it's better if you can keep, let's say, the story, the interest in the story. You can keep the interest in the story during all the time for the whole paper. Proofread the final copy for the typographical errors and misspellings. I tell that. Paper, as a reviewer, I have received many papers, or a lot of papers that are plenty of typographical errors and misspelling. Usually these papers are not going to be accepted because it gives an idea of careless edition. So if you are not careful editing the paper, then you are probably not careful with experiments. This is just a little bit the idea. So better to try to eliminate all typographical errors. Okay, and then, well, this is something that is probably less important, but in general, if you have a series, usually before the and you put a comma here. So it's, well, it's considered for scientific writing a little bit better, but okay, it's nothing important, and you will see many papers without this comma before the and. It's not a big problem, but it's something that if you want, you can try to remember and add this comma here in a series before the and, add a comma. If you have a compound predicate means two sentences that have the same subject and are quite related one to another. So this is, for instance, this case. The bears were captured and then banned. So the bears are the subject of both sentences, and one goes after the other. So they are quite related. So in this case, this comma, is better to remove this comma here. So the correct sentence would be the bears were captured and then banned. Or the telegram was late but contained exciting news. So these are compound predicate sentences. You have two sentences that goes together and they share the same subject and they are related. And then you can have independent clauses. So in these independent clauses, for instance, they can be two clauses that have different subjects or with the same subject but different, let's say, actions, not necessarily related one to the other. So then you can use the comma. And this is an example. I want to be a nurse and I need to receive my science degree. Oops, sorry. So, yeah, these are the two independent clauses. So if you write that, you could write, I want to be a nurse, comma, but I need to receive my science degree. Or we collect bears, comma, but we release mammals. The same subject, but different sentences, unrelated sentences. So these are independent clauses. And then you put the comma. We also put a comma to set off introductory phrases. So, and there's an example here, at night, bears roasted in cavities, and versus the same, but with the comma. At night, comma, bears roasted in cavities. This is much easier to understand, because you can, maybe, I don't know, you read fast the sentence, maybe you can connect bears at night, and then kind of, I don't know, bears that, I don't know, they are awake during night, or no, I don't know, but anyway, it's that maybe you can, if you read it fast, maybe you can connect this night with bears, but here is not possible because you have the comma. It's clear, at night, and then bears roasted in cavities. And complete all comparisons. This is something that sometimes we forget to do that, but it's important. So instead of saying the yield was higher using bromine, maybe you have been talking about some reaction with chloride, bromide, and iodine, something that reacts and something. Yeah? So then you say the yield was higher using bromine, but it's better to finish the sentence. Yeah? So the yield was higher using bromine than chlorine. So this higher means a comparison. So because there is a comparison, it's better you put the two things that are being compared. So just to avoid confusion to the reader. Yeah? So in this case, the sentence is longer, but it's clear. Yeah? And so clarity is very important. Not only brevity, but especially clarity is even more important than brevity. Yeah? So yeah? Try to avoid confusion to the reader. When they read the sentence, it should be clear for them. Okay, other things that maybe we can comment. So, I mean, when we write also, it's quite often the case that we use the word respectively. Yeah? So there is an example here, and the mass of males and females was 45 and 30 kilograms respectively. It's okay, the sentence is not bad, it's okay. But it's even better if you put mass was 45 for males and 30 kilograms for females. This is even more clear. It's clearer. This sentence is clearer, so it's better than the other one. Yeah, because the other one, okay, it's also clear, but it makes you have to make the effort to, to assign males to 45 and females to 30. So in this case, it's already done, so it's probably easy to read. But okay, it's okay. As always. This is just recommendations. Do not use the constructions and or, and this is because the slash sometimes is used it means in mathematics divide into and this kind of thing. So better if you have this sentence, the birds we capture were migrating and or molting, better you put it that way. The birds we capture were migrating, molting, or both. Yeah? So this means this and or. Yeah? And also about the use of that and which. So that usually introduces two clauses, restrictive clauses that are essential to the meaning of the sentence. And the which, the clause that introduces is not essential for the meaning of the sentence. And there is an example here. The B3LIB results, which are our most accurate theoretical data, show a good agreement between the theoretical and so on. So here, if you remove this part of the sentence, the meaning is the same. The B3LIB results show a good agreement between the theoretical retrodiasalder and the experimental value. So so this is not essential for the meaning of the sentence. If it is not essential, then with which? If it is essential, it has to be, to understand the meaning, it has to be included there, then you have to use that. This is the difference between these two pronouns, the use of these two pronouns. Another point is, okay, we have this and this, singular and plural. This is a pronoun, and as a pronoun, you need an antecedent, which is the one you refer, when you use this, you refer to antecedent, so something that you have been talking about. So at the beginning of the sentence, in many cases, it's not clear what is the antecedent. So if you say, for instance, this means that the data are inconclusive, sometimes this is not clear to what it refers. It's better if you put, I don't know, something like this result or this data, or this analysis means that the data are inconclusive. So then it's clear, it's the analysis. You're referring to the analysis, right? If it is in the middle of the sentence, this is not necessary. Usually this is clear what is the antecedent. You are talking about some results, and you can say, and this, something. So then you know that this means the results that you were talking about before. But at the beginning of the sentence, sometimes, or in many cases, it's better, and this is not always full obeyed or followed. It's better to put let's say the noun after the this, no, not just the this. Okay, when rewriting, you often can eliminate the preposition the from a sentence. Not always, but in many cases you can remove the. If the meaning stays the same, so let's do it. Let's remove the. And also, well, there are a lot of them in a paper. And also the word that in some cases can be removed. If so, do it. The data suggests that the lake was polluted. You can put the data suggests the lake was polluted. The meaning is exactly the same. One word less, then better. So the shorter, the better. And also this is for all sentences, not only English, but all languages the same. So you have double negative usually are very confusing. If you put I don't know, the process is less destabilizing. Okay, this less destabilizing is difficult to interpret. It's much more easy if you put more stabilizing, which is the meaning of less destabilizing. So it's because there are two negative words here, the less and destabilizing. So you put more stabilizing, and then when you read it, it's very clear. Okay, if you read that, okay, you have to think about, okay, less destabilizing, so this means more stabilizing. But if you read this, it's clear, so better. Okay, what more? About using quotes. I mean, I told you that you can quote other authors. However, I mean, you cannot do an introduction, plenty of quotes. You can make one quote, maybe two, but probably not not more. So in case you have already used this possibility, you have quote some author, then maybe what you have to do is just to paraphrase. So this means that you write the same sentence in other words, and at the end you put the reference. So but you are not using exactly the words that were used by this author. So okay, consider the possibility to use quotes from time to time, but do not abuse this way of writing. Okay, ordering is important. Consider these two sentences and we can read them. The oxidative coupling of the two alkene ligands then generates a metallocyclopentadiene or a metallocyclopentatryene with a bis-carbene structure, which has been found to be the rate determining step. Okay, so this is a possible sentence, and now let's consider the other one. The oxidative coupling of the two alkene ligands, which has been found to be rate determining step, then generates a metallocyclopentadiene. So this is much more clear because let's say this clause is closer to the one that is affecting. So you are talking about a reaction step, which is the oxidative coupling, and this is the rate determining step. So it's better to put this sentence at this point, not at the end of the sentence, because okay, then it's difficult to relate this part of the sentence to the initial, let's say, to the step that we are talking about, which is this oxidative coupling. So, okay, the ordering is important. Okay, we also discussed this before with this only, depending on you put the only, the meaning that you're generating with your sentence is quite different. So here is something similar, much clearer this sentence than this one here. Okay, and then we have several words here. For example, I don't know, the use of among and between. So among is when you have a relation between more than two items, and between when you have a comparison between two items. So among us, I mean, there are three people that something. When we consider a number of people or a number of objects, whatever, then we have to use among and not between. Okay, so there are several examples here of these kind of words that, let's say, for people that we are not English native speakers can be sometimes confusing or something like that. So I just leave them to you to, if you have time, just read it and okay. You will see it's easy, but it's good to remember and to know. Okay, so let's go forward. So this is the same. Okay, this is also some quite typical error. So many people use a species without the S. for the singular. So for one system, for one um, species, they use the without s. It's not correct. Species is the same for singular and plural. The same for data. The same. You use data, and it's exactly the same for singular and plural. Okay, you have here also some these Greek, these Latin expressions. Okay, some of them are very clear. You have used it many times, probably at talk or a priori. Others are less clear. By the way, this et al that we use many times, it means et alii, and this means and others. In Latin, et alii means and others. Just take a look at all these Latin expressions, because maybe you can find them in some papers. You can also use them in your papers. It's okay. Okay, another one which is very useful is this IE, right? This is we see this a lot in papers, and this means itest, or itaest, which means that is. In other words. Okay, so there are several here. Just take a look, and you will see. Okay, so you can use in some cases non-English words, but this is quite strange. It's not very common. But in this paper, I found bomben, and I like it very much. But I thought it was in Catalan, but it's not. It's French. So the author is Jean Barilén, which is a Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So he uses at the end this bomben. But okay, in Catalan we also have the same expression. Okay, anyway. Okay, now we have looked at the structure of a paper. So we have gone through all the possible parts, and we have seen what we have to do, more or less some recommendations of what has to be done in each part. And now let me show you, let's discuss a little bit the possibility to have other formats. It's not only full papers that we write. In some cases you write communications, letter of communications. And what are letters of communication? So yeah, they are short accounts of preliminary results of unusual novelty and urgency. So this is the keywords. It should be novel and urgent. Then if it is novel and urgent, then it can go in a communication. Right? So this urgency should justify immediate disclosure. So this means that the editor tries to finish all process of editing quite fast. So referees should send the comments in few days, and all the process is quite fast. And the final paper also appears in few weeks. So the problem is that they have, in general, several restrictions on space, because they are letters. Usually they are very short. So, and the journals that publish communications, in general, they accept to publish 2, 3, in some cases 4 pages, but no more. So they are quite short. And the detail, generally the detail you give is much less than in full papers. In some research fields, and chemistry is among them, probably biology also, I'm not sure, short letters or communications are more prestigious than full papers in some cases. Because of competition for space, they can be referred furiously. So general referees are very hard. When you send a communication, you can expect comments that are a little bit hard. So because you have to justify that this publication is urgent, and this means that in the cover letter, we will talk about the cover letters in the tomorrow, or maybe today. So you should indicate why the paper should be published urgently. And you should explain why to the editor why this is the case. It is not compulsory, but in many cases you have a communication and then you write a full paper. This is perfectly acceptable. Well, let's suppose you have a new reaction, something that is very novel, and you think it's important for the, in this case, chemistry community. So you send the paper with a communication with some example of this reaction, maybe 1, 2, or 3 examples. And then later on, you accumulate more evidence with more reactions. Maybe you do also theoretical study of the reaction mechanism and so on, and you add new data, and then you have a full paper. And then you publish after the communication. After several months, you publish the full paper. This can be done. So this is something, sometimes the communication stays there and that's all. In some cases, after the communication, you have the full paper. But you write the communication maybe because you think, okay, this is very important, so the scientific community should know it as soon as possible, then I write a communication. Or even you write a communication because you think that you have other competitors and you want to be the first to publish this, so you do it urgently in the form of communication. So this kind of things happens. And then there is usually in the communication you have a single section. So everything, so you don't have the typical structure of a paper with the introduction, methods, results and discussion. There are no sections there. However, let's say the first 3 paragraphs, they are usually kind of introduction. The fourth one is a kind of methods, and the rest are results and discussion. And at the end, you finish with a paragraph that is the conclusion. So they are not, so you don't have, let's say, the different sections, but at the end, the structure is more or less the same. So one introduction, brief explanation of the method, because this is a communication, so it should be brief explanation of the method. And then some paragraph with the results and discussion, and a last paragraph saying in summary, in conclusion, and something like that. Yeah? So this is more or less what you have to do. So I told you maybe one paragraph or a couple of sentences about materials and methods, and then the rest can go to the supporting information. So you can say, okay, we did this. For more information, see supporting information or something like that. For more detailed information, see supporting information. And this is the letter of communication, and this is what I ask you to write as exercise. So you have to write one letter of communication, and okay, you have the template. If you want to use this template, it's okay. If you don't want to use template, it's also okay, no problem. And okay, this is more or less what I expect. Let me show you an example of what more or less what I would like to have. So you know, we go, I think here. Let me show you. Here. Yeah. Okay, let's. Okay, can you see? Yeah. Okay, this is an example of a communication that was for a previous, let's say, for some years ago. And you see there is the title, authors. Here you see AA in all cases, but let's say in this case the affiliation was here because this is the template of the chemical communication that they want the affiliation in this position here. And okay, you see there is short abstract, right? So even in the communication you can have a short abstract here. And then you see this first paragraph is about an introduction, some schemes if you want. And then here there is, we decided to make, I don't know, so this is, so here it's more or less the objective or the aim of the paper. And okay, then there are some results here and some references. Okay, just 2 pages in this case. So if you want to use 3, okay, but better 2 pages. And I mean, the structure is the same that in full papers, but there is no sections. So the first paragraph refers to the introduction, then there is a paragraph that describes a little bit what have you done, which method have you used, and that what are the main results and discussion, and then a conclusion at the end. So this is more or less what I expect to have from you. Okay, there is another example here if you want. This is another communication. Let me see. Oh yeah, no. So this is in format again. You see the author here, the title. Okay, corresponding author, affiliation also here. Yeah, this was from Lekia. You see, I'm probably 2 or 3 paragraphs of introduction, some scheme, and then I guess some results. And okay, here there is, I guess, some conclusion at the end, and also he or she puts some acknowledgements. So you can also, at the end, if you want to add some acknowledgements and the references. So in this case, he used 3 pages. So if you can use 2 better, 3 pages is okay also. You send me the communication, and then I will read it, and I will tell you if there is something that maybe I should be changed or whatever. Okay, anyway, so this is the exercise that you have to do, and I think the deadline, I think it was 14 June, I don't remember exactly, but you have this information at the beginning of these slides. Okay, you can have notes. Notes are similar to communications in the sense that they are very short, but they are different in the sense that they are not urgent. It's simply that you have something to communicate that is, well, it's kind of experiment that you have done, and for some reason, it's not, you don't need a full paper to explain everything you have found. So with just a note, this means 2 or 3 pages, you can explain everything, and then you can use these notes. It's not that all journals accept notes, but there are many. They accept notes, some of them accept communications also, full paper, so it depends. On the journal, you have to see, to look at the information for authors, and you look what type of papers you can submit to this journal. But in notes, it's quite frequent. You can just send notes to papers. And you see let's say the results in general are kind of have a narrow scope. So they are not so, let's say, well, you don't need a lot of space to explain everything, so just because it's, I don't know, something that you have observed that is strange behavior or some reaction or whatever, maybe it can be in a note. And notes have also limited space. So in this sense are like communications. There is only one section, there is no subsections, there is some paragraph for introduction, methods, and so on, but you don't have the typical structure of the paper with the different sections. It's all together. And usually it's so 2, 3 pages, 4 pages, no more. Then you have the reviews, and these are overviews of specialized research areas by acknowledged experts. So they are usually published only by invitation of the editor. So either you receive an invitation, and this is wonderful, and then you write the review if you want, or if not, you write an outline of the review that you want to publish, and you send it to the editor. Do not write it before having the permission from the editor. So you have, okay, I want to write a review about something. Then you write an outline, what will be the different parts of the review, and send to the editor. And the editor looks, and if he finds it's okay, then the paper, let's say, you can start writing the review. It's better to wait until the permission of the editor, because otherwise it takes a long time, and if it is not accepted, it's a pity. You have lost a lot of time. It's a little bit hard, the work to write the reviews, because you have to read a lot of literature. So there are no strict rules on how a review should be written. So we have put a paper, we have say, okay, introduction, methods, results and discussion, conclusion, and so on. Not in a review. In a review, maybe you have, in many of the cases you have an introduction, but then it depends on the review. So we are, for instance, now thinking on writing a review on 2+2+2 reactions, and the different sections will be 2+2 reactions catalyzed by cobalt, 2+2 reaction catalyzed by ruthenium. So we are separating the different sections in metals, but this is because the reaction is catalyzed by different methods. But maybe another reaction you will do another, you will decide another other type of sections or another outline. So it will differ in any case. So there is no way that the review should be right. So you decide. Deciding detail, scope, and writing an outline are the first step. So you first decide, okay, I will write a review about this, and this is more or less the sections of my review, right? And you make a calculation of how many papers will be referenced by you. And with this information, you send a letter to the editor, and if the editor agrees, then you start writing the review. But if not, it's better to not do it. It's a very time-consuming task. But the good point is that if you write a review, they have lots of citations in general. So this is good for you. In general, it's good to have citations, so a review can gather a lot of citations. Then you have these additions and corrections. So let's suppose that you have a full paper, and after 2 or 3 months, you notice that you make an error in one of the tables or something like that. Then you send an addition or correction to the editor. In some journals, maybe it's called corrigendum. In others, it's erratum. In others, they are simply additions and corrections. So depending the name, depends on the journal, but it's always the same. So you are correcting some data that was erroneous, was wrong in your initial paper. This is not a problem. These additions and corrections do not go to reviewers. It's simply the editor accepts them usually, immediately. Simply you send, okay, we make an error here, please can you correct it? And you send the error, and usually it is accepted. So the error can be detected by readers. The error can be detected by you or by some fellows or whatever. It doesn't matter. But if you have some error, you have to decide also if the error is so important that you make a correction or addition. In some cases, the error is so small that it's not needed, a correction or addition. But if it's important, it affects, let's suppose, a table or something like that, then maybe it's better to correct it. And here I put an example, and this is a paper that we published in 2005, and in 2006, we found that there was an error in this column here. So this table was much larger, but it was one of the columns has some errors. So we send a correction, and we say, okay, here it says something like the fluke p-values in the last column of table 1 was not correct. They should be correct or something like that as follows. And this is the distance. And at the end it says something like the conclusions remains unchanged because the errors were not so important to change the conclusion. It was the same. So it was something that was set here. So if you make an error, this is something that it can happen. I don't know. In this case, was a bug in the program, and when this author Eduard discovered it, so we send the new table, and that's all. It's not. This is not misconduct. This can happen. We are human, and we can make errors. No problem. So you can correct them. Remember that you can correct them with an erratum. In this case, his name was erratum. In some journals, it's corrigendum. In other journals, it's a correction. So it depends. Okay, this is another correction. So you say this is correction. Correction. Journal of Materials Chemistry B. So in this case, this is okay. This is probably okay. No, probably no. This correction is done because of misconduct. So in this case, in my opinion, it should be a retraction, not a correction. But the editor accepts the correction. But if I were the editor, I would not accept that correction. I would retract the paper. See, the authors would like to acknowledge and apologize for, I cannot read it here. See if I can read it. No. Can you read it? For using, oh no, yeah. For using some figures or something like that, no? From reference, I don't know, from some text, from reference 1 and 2 below without appropriate attribution in some sentence from section 3.1 to 3.6, and that scheme 1 was withdrawn from scheme 1 in reference to without appropriate attribution. The authors would like to clarify that this work is not the first example of such amphiphilic polymer unrated work is cited in the manuscript. So they copy some sentences directly from other papers. They use a scheme without making reference to this paper. And moreover, they claim that it was the first something, example of something, and it was not. So I mean, it was a complete disaster. I don't know why the author accepted to do the correction. So they make the correction, and at the end, the conclusion remained unchanged. So this guy that was in Twitter, and I saw this in Twitter. So step 1, plagiarize someone else's text and figures. Step 2, acknowledge them. And step 3, who cares? I think this should not be accepted. But anyway, it was in that way a correction. Okay, there are also another format that is interesting. This one is the comments. It's not all journals accept comments, but there are many of them that they accept comments. And this means that you read a paper and you do not agree with the conclusions. Maybe, remember, the results in general are the results, so this cannot be changed. But the interpretation sometimes depends on your point of view. Let's suppose that you do not agree, you can write a comment and you can criticize the paper. Criticism is perfect, but should not be personal attacks, let's say. Simply you discuss the science. If you discuss the science, it's okay, no problem. And you can write a comment. So they contain significant remarks on work previously published, usually in the same journal. In general, if you have a comment, you publish the comment in the same journal that was published the paper before. And are restricted to approximately 1 page, so you cannot use a lot of space. Just 1 page, but okay, in 1 page maybe you can write what you do not like from the paper that you are criticizing. So in general, okay, these comments are subjected to peer review. So they are sent to referees, and the referees can make changes or ask for changes or whatever. And if the comment is accepted, then the authors are notified by the editor. So let's suppose someone makes a comment on your paper, you will be told by the editor, okay, this guy is making this comment. And then if you want, you can make a rebuttal. And all go together. Usually the comment stays there after you have written the rebuttal, and then they go together. So the rebuttal or the reply, if you want. So you have the possibility to reply, and this is an example. We wrote this paper. This was already in 2005 or 6, I don't remember. And then there was this professor, Richard Bader, who is quite known in the field in theoretical chemistry. And he wrote a comment criticizing our results. And we wrote here the reply. So we criticize the critic, let's say, the comment of Professor Bader. Anyway, so it's this kind of things also is possible. And in general, I mean, when you have this kind of controversies in literature, because this is a controversy, right? Basically, we found some results and we interpreted in a way that Professor Bader didn't like it, so he made the comments that he thought they were appropriate, and we, at the end, we reply to these comments and also criticize the conclusions from Professor Bader. So anyway, this kind of controversy usually also attracts many people, many of your peers. So if you have one comment, you can think, oh, now I have to make the reply and so on. This is usually good because there is controversy, then people will read it and will also cite it. So it's good to have this kind of discussions in the literature. Okay, and then we have retractions. So what means retractions? Retractions mean that you have published something, but you withdraw the publication because it can be for several reasons. But it could be serious errors, it could be plagiarism, It could be duplicate, concurrent publishing, self-plagiarism. Well, it could be for several reasons, but there are retractions. And you see 80,000 from 1970 till 2018. So this is the number of retractions that have been well, published during this time. I mean, remember that we are talking only in 2018, we are talking about 4 or 5 million papers published. So it's nothing. So the percentage is quite low, but increases. It's increasing. So every year there are more and more retractions. And probably this is because there are, as a researcher, we are pressed to publish more and try to publish in better journals and these kind of things. And then it's easy at a certain point, there is some misconduct or something like that, and this is why the number of retractions probably is increasing. So we are talking about 20, 25 retractions per month. It's not that much, because, I mean, number of publications are incredibly large. Okay, so, I mean, if you are interested in this topic, you can read some of these, let's say, articles here. But okay. So in the case of a Springer, so it seems that it was 2%, so it's quite percentage relatively large, but in general it's not that large. This is an example of retraction. You see here retraction from Chemical Communication, another chemistry journal. But it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit, let's say, annoying, this kind of retraction, because you see here all the authors, and they say, all these guys, which are all except the PhD student and someone else who was there, all these guys wish to resign as co-authors in the above article. So before the retraction, they say, okay, we resign to be co-author, but okay, I mean, this is not acceptable. I mean, if you accept to be an author, then all the responsibility that goes for this, you should accept this responsibility. So apparently, there is another thing that I find incredible. They say, Shifeng Liu has declared that he contributed only to revision of the English language. You write this. I mean, how can you write this? I mean, we said that an author should have a contribution that it should be relatively important. It's not correction of English is not enough to be in the list of authors. You could be in the acknowledgement section, but not in the list of authors. And the rest, they say, okay, we have not participated in the experimental research that was reported in this article. So the correct authorship list are this guy and this guy. Probably they are PhD students or something like that. So it's kind of, the bosses are simply leaving all the responsibility of the misconduct to these people. Maybe it's true, maybe it was just the PhD students, but okay. I mean, it's a little bit, I don't like it very much, this. And then once they have done so we are not authors of this paper, they are the only two authors. We, the name authors in the correct authorship list, hereby wholly retract this chemical communication article due to data fabrication. So it was data fabrication. Okay, so I think it's not nice. I mean, if you sign an article, you are responsible as the rest of the authors. All the authors are responsible for the paper. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. This is what happens. Anyway, this was retracted, and this is an example. Okay, so now we have finished this second part of the course, which was the longest, and now we move to submission, revision, and publishing processes. So all that goes once you have written the paper, and you have to submit the paper, and you have to fight with the editor until you get publication. So before submitting, you need a cover letter. So cover letter must be submitted at the same time as the manuscript and must provide the corresponding author's name. So remember that you can have in the paper several corresponding authors, but only one corresponding author is the one that exchanges information with the editor. So this is the corresponding author names, postal and email addresses, and telephone and fax numbers. Well, probably we can remove now the fax numbers. We can put maybe the Skype direction or something like that. But anyway, all editorial correspondence concerning receipt, status, review, revision, and publication of a manuscript will be sent only to one person. This is the corresponding author, let's say the real corresponding author, in the sense that is the one that deals with the editor during the evaluation period. Although not compulsory, so not all journals ask it, but in general it's good or it's highly recommended to write a brief statement explaining the importance of the work submitted. So you write just a paragraph, not very long, and you explain why this work is important. And you do in general in a less formal way. So maybe you can use a language that is less formal than in the article. But you explain the editor why your work is important. If you submit a communication, you also should explain why it is urgent, why the publication of this paper is urgent. So the urgency should be also justified. A good justification can make the difference between a paper sent for review and one rejected without further consideration. So there are many journals, especially the very good ones, that simply you send the paper, the editor looks at the paper, reads the cover letter, looks at the paper, and maybe the paper is rejected in just a few days. It's not sent to reviewers. So if we have a good cover letter and we explain clearly why it's important your work, then probably the editor will make this first, let's say that this first screening will allow your paper to pass the first screening and send the paper to referees. So it's good to have a short cover letter. So the best cover letter consists, use plain language, and give a clear explanation of the advances and discovery made in the course of the research. So the editor probably is not expert in your field, so do not use very specialized language. Better you use plain language. Keep it short, just a few sentences about why it's important. 1-2 paragraphs, not very long. The language should be less formal than in that of the paper. And the point is that journals receive many papers per day and editors see hundreds of manuscripts per year, so take this opportunity to get your work noticed. So the editor will not read the whole paper. Well, in some cases maybe yes, but not always. But at least the cover letter, he or she will read the cover letter and use this opportunity to tell him why is important your work and why it should be published. So you have to address the following questions. Why is the work important in the cover letter? Does it make an important process faster, more sensitive, or can you uncover new information that could be not measured before, or did you discover something new about, I don't know, chemical reaction, some gene, or I don't know. What are the broader impacts of the research? Who might be interested in the research? If you have talked to an editor, so this sometimes happens. Let's suppose you have a poster in your, you go to a congress, you have a poster, and an editor comes and says, okay, this is very interesting, send it to me, right? Send it to this journal. Then maybe you can write a letter, okay, following your advice or something like that, following the advice that you give me in this congress, in that day, I'm submitting, so the editor knows that he encouraged you to submit the paper. So then this is good for the paper. This is, if the editor encourages you, so this means that at least the first part of the screening the manuscripts by the editor, this part will be passed and the paper will be sent to referees. So by providing a clear writing and concise cover letter, you can give your manuscript the best possible chance for publication. So, okay, it's this idea. So usually in the cover letter also you have to suggest, or at least during the submission process, if not in the cover letter, you should suggest a series names for reviewing the paper. So 5 to 8 persons that are competent to review your manuscript. Then avoid suggesting names of friends, because probably the editor will look, I don't know. You can, in this Web of Science that I showed you some days before, you can put For instance, you can write, I want to see all the papers written by this person and this other one. So if you put a friend here and the editor makes this, checks that, so he will notice that you are a friend, you collaborate, you do things together. So probably it's not a good idea to, if you have a close friend, to put it as a reference. Okay. If you have just one or two collaborations, probably it's okay, but not if you have a lot of them. So also, non-expert scientists is better to not put them if they are not expert in the topic of the paper. Yeah? Maybe they should be someone that knows the topic so they can make a good assessment of what about the paper. Yeah? Authors may request that the specific people not be used as referees. So you can, let's suppose that you know that someone will give a very bad report about the paper because for some reason your supervisor and this person are not very friends. So you can tell the editor, please do not send the paper to this person. So you can also say that. But these suggestions both, the suggestions of reviewers and the suggestion from non-preferred reviewers, for some people that you don't want that the paper is sent, both are just suggestions. So the editor can do whatever they want. They have, for the editor, it's not compulsory to follow your opinion, let's say, about the referees and the non-preferred reviewers. So he can send the paper to one of the non-preferred reviewers. But in general, it will not do. It will follow your advice. So this suggestion will be advisory to the editors, not a condition for submission. So what editors usually do, but okay, it's not always the case, but in general, they will take one of these 5 to 8 persons that you have suggested. They will consider one of these as a referee, and then they will use another one independent. Yeah? This is probably what they will do. In some cases, you can have not only one or two, you can have 3 or 4 referees, so it depends on the journal. So if you have no reply in 2 months, then you can send an email to the editor saying, what is the status of my paper? Could you please tell me what is the status of my paper? This is okay. But okay, after 2 or 3 weeks, no, because I mean, it takes time to review a paper or something like that. So do not press the editor too much because okay, it's better to have the editor as a friend, as a possible enemy. So what I told you before, you can ask the editor to not send the paper to some expert, but you have to give a reason why. Yeah? So for instance, because of direct scientific rivalry, we ask you to not send the paper to, let's suppose, Professor whatever, Department of Chemistry or whatever. And here, if you have, there are 2 articles discussing how to make good cover letters, but more or less is what I explained you before, but if you want to have additional reading, so there is some additional reading here. Okay, this is an example of cover letter. This is already for 2012, so quite long ago. So I think this is probably too long. Yeah? In this case, we make a cover letter that was probably too long. It should be shorter. But anyway, there is here, let's say, it explains the why we did this investigation and what are the main results and why they are important. And then we put as potential referees, we suggest, and we put a series of names here. There's only one name, but we put several names from 5 to 8 people that could maybe review this paper. So this is what you have to put here. Okay, so this is an example of cover letter, but I'm sure that your supervisors have many of them, so you can follow some models from your supervisor. Okay, and maybe now we can discuss a little bit about the scientific ethics. And this is, okay, most of these, I think, are the same for all journals, but this is from ACS, American Chemical Society Ethics. If you go there, you will see that they say, an author's central obligation is to present an accurate and complete account of their research performance. An author should recognize that journal space is a precious resource created at considerable cost. An author, therefore, has an obligation to use it wisely and economically. Yeah, I told you, if you have, for instance, just 4 numbers, do not use a table, use a text, because you use less space, and so on. If you so if you can avoid, you can make things brief and shorter, so that the better. Not only because you save space, but also because sometimes it is clear the paper is easy to read if it is shorter in general. An author should cite those publications that have been influential in determining the nature of the reported work. Omitting citations, if considered intentional, is a misconduct. We already discussed that, the importance to use the references that are really important. So you have to cite only the relevant publications. Fragmentation of research reports should be avoided. Let's suppose that you have a series of molecules and you decide, okay, I will make 3 parts and it's exactly the same but with 3 different groups of molecules. This is something that in principle should be avoided. It should be all together. Because it's not ethical, let's say. Fragmentation consumes journal space excessively and unduly complicates literary researches. It is improper for an author to submit manuscript describing essentially the same research to more than 1 journal of primary publication, unless it is a resubmission of a manuscript rejected or withdrawn from publication. And here I have another anecdote, and it's from your supervisor, from Francesc Teixidor and Clara. I don't know if he told you, but Clara told me that certain day, he entered the office of Francesc, and he saw a picture there, and he said, okay, I have seen this before, somewhere. And she come back to her office, and okay, he was looking, and he found a paper that she was being referee of this paper with the same figure. So he go again with Francesc, and he said, look, I'm being referee of the same paper than you. And they say, oh, yeah. And they look, and it was 2 different journals. So this is clearly a misconduct, so this cannot be done, right? So what they do, it's easy to understand. They send the same paper to 2 journals, and then let's suppose that one journal say major revision, the other one say minor revision. So they took minor revision, and they say, okay, we withdraw the paper because, I don't know, we cannot do the revision asked by the referees and so on. So they have then the minor revision to make the changes and the paper published. So this is the way they proceed, but it's clearly a misconduct. We cannot do that because in that way we are using too much resources. You are using, instead of the typical 2 referees, you are using 4. You are pressing the system too much, and okay, it's not acceptable. This kind of course, it's not acceptable. So I know that Francesc and Clara told the editors, and I'm sure that they rejected the paper, but I don't know if they did, let's say, further punishment of these authors or not. I don't know, but it's something that should not be accepted, these kind of things. You can submit to another journal if it's rejected, but not at the same time. Okay, but so people sometimes do strange things. Information obtained privately. So sometimes you are talking with someone in the Congress and you get some information that is interesting for your paper. You can put, I don't know, Paul von Rageslayer, let's say, personal communication or something like that. This is okay, but you should first inform him or her, right? So you should inform that you are going to explain this conversation in a paper to the person that you had the conversation before. So they should know before, because maybe they are not. They do not agree. Maybe it was a discussion with you, and okay, I don't know. For some reason, they say something, but they think another thing. They think, or they consider that, I don't know. Maybe you discuss about a theory, and they don't like very much, but they say, okay, it's more or less okay, or something like that, and you're right. Okay, this theory is okay. Personal communication maybe this is something that this author don't want to be involved in such, let's say, statement. So you have to inform him, and oops, sorry. You have to inform so that the personal communication should not be used or reported in the author's work without explicit permission from the investigator with whom the information originated. So you have to ask them, okay, do you mind if I use this conversation in our paper, in my paper, or something like that? Okay, the corresponding author must reveal to the editor and to the readers of the journal any potential and or relevant competing financial or other interest. And here, now I remember it was a recent case for this New York Cancer Center. I don't remember. Do you remember? It was some Spanish, the director of this center. I don't remember the name now, but it was a Spanish guy, and it was sorry? Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah, no, but it was not this. It was a Catalan one. It was Josep Baselga. Josep Baselga. Do you remember Josep Baselga? It was some controversy also around his work because he published several papers without saying that he had contracts for several pharmaceutical companies. And because of that, this was published by some Washington Post or some journal like that, and he had to resign as head of this cancer center in New York, which is a very important one. So this is okay. This is an example of, let's say, having competing financial, let's say, conflicts. If you have a conflict of interest, it should be said in the paper. Yeah? There is usually a part in the, when you submit a journal, they ask you, do you have conflict of interest? And usually you say, no, there is no conflict of interest in this paper. But if you have a contract with some pharmaceutical company or these kind of things, then maybe you can have this kind of conflicts, and this should be indicated in the paper. Okay, an experimental or theoretical study may sometimes justify criticism, and you can make a comment if you want, even severe criticism of the work of another scientist. When appropriate, such criticism may be offered in published papers. However, in no case is personal criticism considered to be appropriate. So no personal attacks. You can criticize a scientific scientific person, of course. You can criticize the work of a scientist, but not personally. You cannot do personal attacks. And then there is this plagiarism. The plagiarism is defined as the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or works without giving appropriate credit. So this is not acceptable. Authors should not engage in plagiarism or self-plagiarism. So verbatim is one of these words that was in the list of Latin expressions and means exact copy of some sentence or something like that. So verbatim or near verbatim copying or very close paraphrasing of text or result from another's work. So this plagiarism or self-plagiarism or unacceptably close replication to the author's own previously published text or results presented as entirely new material. Editors have tools to detect plagiarism. So if you go here, you will see that. We have now, as university, we have access to this URCUM program. And we are also sending the thesis to the URCUM program to detect possible plagiarism. Remember that it was a few weeks or months ago, it was a lot of controversy about the thesis of the president of Spain, so Sanchez. At the end, it seems that it was no plagiarism. But okay. So these kind of things have to be controlled, let's say. Yeah? So the thesis is sent to the URCUN, and okay, we look at the possible plagiarism. Yeah? The URCUN gives you a percentage of the sentences that are equal to other sentences that have been published before. So if you get a percentage of 20%, is not usually something that you have to be worried about. Yeah? So percentage larger than that, maybe then. Because, I mean, 20%, so it could be perfectly be that it's in the part of the references or is in the part of methods and materials. So it's not, usually it's not a problem. But anyway, this URCUN gives not only the percentage, but also gives you the sentences that have been found in other documents. And then you can compare and you can see if there is really a problem with plagiarism or not. So, okay, these people use this cross-check, I don't know. But anyway, they have tools to detect possible plagiarism. So it's not a good idea to copy fragments from other works, even if it is your own work. So the repetition of a sentence is not considered plagiarism or self-plagiarism. So it's not a problem. You can repeat a sentence and this is okay. But you cannot repeat, for instance, a paragraph. But a sentence is okay. So about this, in biomedical research, there were these 2,047 retracted publications till May 3, 2012. 21.3% were due to error, this is okay. 67.4 were due to fraud. So it seems that this fraud is 43.4. Oh no, to fraud, while 67.4 were due to fraud, 43.4, duplicate publication 14.2, and plagiarism 9.8. This is the reference that I found this data. So retractions have increased 50 times over the past decade, while publications have risen by less than 50%. Okay. Yeah, but still, I mean, the number of retractions is not so high, but anyway, there are some of them. So for instance, in 2011, 300 retractions from 1.4 million papers. So it's not a big percentage, but okay, something. Yeah? Scientific fraud is a suicidal act for the career of the perpetrator. Yeah? This is something you have to keep in mind. It's not a good way to progress in science. I mean, maybe it will take 2 years or maybe 5 or 10, but at the end it will be discovered, and then if you have committed fraud, then probably you will be fired from the system. Yeah.
Because sometimes you have to write an article, I don't know, for Europe, and then another magazine want to publish the same article, but in Asia, for example. And
So if there is a problem.
if there's a problem,
Well,
like the article,
yeah, I have to say, yeah,
in Chinese.
yeah, I have to say that I'm not aware of this possibility, but let's say once you publish, the copyright, the right to make copies of this article is owned by the journal. So if the journal accepts to this paper to be translated in other language and published in another journal, then of course it's not a problem, but they should give the permission. So I understand, I'm not sure, but I guess that the journal that want to publish something that has been published before, they have to be in contact with this journal that have the copyright and ask for permission. I guess this is the way, probably is done.
If it's the same journal, because sometimes you have different editions.
Okay. Then if it is the same journal, they can do whatever they want with because they have the copyright. So if it is, well, I consider that no, but okay. I think you should sell this as only one publication, right? But okay, if you want, you can put two. Why not? But okay.
It's two because they have different titles.
Yeah.
And it's different area.
Yeah. Well, now I remember that we have one of these journals in chemistry, is Angewandte Chemie, and there is the German edition and the English edition. Usually, as authors, if you publish there, you consider that you have done one publication because it's simply a translation. And you can put the two references in the same let's say, in the same line of your curriculum. I would not use 2 lines, but okay, this is up to you. In principle, I guess you cannot sell this as if you have 2 papers. You have published 1 paper, in my opinion.
And when you publish on the same journal, imagine that now there is this thing with the sunblock or something, and then you publish an article there 3 years ago, and the journal asks you, well, now it's a trending topic, we want to republish again this because it is interesting.
To republish, to make the, okay, to publish the same paper 3 years after. Okay,
So this with peer review, that they, after a while, they publish.
but this is in a form, you are talking about in a form of review? You are going to publish the results again in a form of a review?
No,
No.
peer review. Peer review.
Without peer review, or?
No, I mean, when the editor is asking you
Yeah?
for review, like you explained about these reactions that were only with metals, you read what is not new, it's not an investigation from you. You simply make an schema of what has been written, and then after 3 years, we ask you again, well, can we publish already because we think was very good, and you are publishing.
And you publish exactly the same paper, but I consider that this is just 1 publication, but okay, if you want to consider that there is 2, why not? But I would say that this is just 1 publication. For me, if it's exactly the same, everything is the same, so the systems are the same, the writing is the same.
Has a different impact if you publish something in Spain than if you publish in England.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think that the impact is different.
Yeah, I agree with that, but still, I mean, if it's the same publication, or just a translation, I would say that this is 1 paper. You can maybe use one or the other, but only use one, I would say. Okay, so there is there was a case also. This is probably 3 or 4 years ago in Vigo about the plagiarism. It was, as far as I know, it was some supervisor tell a PhD student, please, can you write a paper about some results that you obtained? So the PhD student was doing some experiments, and he has the tables and so on. And the supervisor said, okay, please, can you do the first draft of the paper? And what the PhD student did was to take a paper which was the same, let's say, subject, but different compounds and these kind of things. And I mean, he used exactly the same sentence, everything was the same, and he simply changed the tables and then changed some names in the text and so on, but it was basically, let's say, the same sentences were used. Yeah? And he didn't tell the supervisor. Right? So the supervisor read the paper and say, okay, it's quite well written, maybe make a small correction and so on, okay, we can send it. And they send it. So it was this type of plagiarism. It was that they used the same sentences that other papers, but it was completely different subject. It was not, let's say, a copy of a paper in the sense, copy or the same tables and everything. No, the tables were different because the experiments were really different. But the sentence in the introduction, in the results and discussion, and were exactly the same, just changing the name of the molecules and these kind of things. So this was a big, it has a big also impact even in international journals, especially in Germany. And well, in Spain, as usual, it was no one resigned, no, there was no, it happened nothing. So this is a little bit sad, but this is okay. On the other hand, yeah, it's a difficult situation because yeah, you can blame the supervisor, but okay, the supervisor read the paper and you think, okay, it's okay, it's well written, just make some small changes. So I don't know, it's this kind of things that could be discussed if, let's say, the supervisor should have been punished some way or the PhD student, I don't know. But it was well, an interesting case of plagiarism, if you want to read it. It was even in El País, so it's a newspaper, you know, El País, general newspaper. The case was there, but not only in El País, but in other journals. Okay, and this is another example, but this is the same author. You see, this is, I don't remember, well, I cannot read it, but it's the same author, but in two different journals, and it uses basically the same sentence, even the same compound. So probably in this case, it's not only that the sentences are the same, but even the compounds. In this case, it's more, the misconduct is very clear. Okay, so if you have time and you like the topic, maybe you can also read a couple of articles here about this topic, plagiarism. Okay, and then we can move to discuss the right and permissions. So once we submit the work, the editor usually asks us the copyright of the paper. Or it could be after it is accepted, but usually it's even before. Just to submit the work, the editor says, okay, sign the copyright. So what you do usually is the corresponding author who is responsible of signing the copyright, and then this should be done with the consent of all co-authors, and you transfer the copyright ownership during the submission process to the editor. And what this means that if you want to make a copy of this paper, then you should ask the editor because you don't have permission to copy this paper. Well, in fact, you keep some permissions. So this depends on the editorial. So you have to look at the editorial what they say. But in many cases, you can reuse figures, tables, artwork, illustrations, text extract of up to 400 words. It depends on the editorial. You have to look at, and data from the author's work for teaching or training purposes in presentations at conferences and seminars in a subsequent scholarly publications, and for the posting on the author's personal website, university networks or primary employers, institutional websites and conference websites that feature presentation by the author. So you say you have some permission to use this work, but it's not fully permission. You don't have fully permission to make copies of your work. So you have transferred this right to the editor once you submit the paper. So you retain the rest of the rights. So let's say intellectual property, you keep the intellectual property of this paper, but not the copyright. Copyright belongs to the editorial. Okay, of course, I mean, if you think that your work deserves a patent or something like that, then you should seek expert legal advice. In this case, you can go to this OITT, so the Technology Transfer and Research Office of our university, and they will help you. But if you have a patent, you should have the patent first and then publish the paper. Okay, in reviews. So in reviews, let's suppose that you are doing a review for these ACS journals. ACS is an editorial, it's the American Chemical Society. And let's suppose that in your review, you include material that was published previously in a non-ACS journal. So this means in another editorial. It doesn't matter if you participate in this paper or not. But you should ask for permission to the copyright holder before republishing the material. So maybe you have made the figure because you are author of a paper, but let's suppose that this paper was published in Wiley editorial, and now you want to publish a review in ACS. Then you have to ask Wiley, could I use this figure, despite it was your figure, but it's not more. Once you give you to the editorial, then it's theirs figure. So you have to ask them, could I use this figure for my review? And they will say usually yes. But okay, in principle they could say no, but it's not the case. But you have to ask permission. What you cannot do is to publish without permission, this figure again. Mm, yeah, I think that at the moment that you sign the copyright, I mean, the right to make copies of the text, figures, everything is something that belongs to the editorial, and you have to ask permission. But okay, I would say that it will be granted in most of the cases or in all cases. So at the end, it's not a big problem. But okay, it's good to know that in principle you give the rights of making copies of the paper to these persons. So, I mean, however, let's suppose that you have a paper that was published in American Chemical Society. Then it's not needed that you ask for permission, because this figure will be used in another ACS journal, the one that published the review. So then you don't have to ask for permission for the same editorial. But for the other editors, you have to ask. And now, let me show you how you can do that. Okay, if we go here, this is, let's suppose that you want to publish a paper in chemical reviews, for instance, and you have published before a paper in Angewandte Chemie, and you want to use a figure that you have, that it was published in this journal. Right? Then you go to Angewandte. Let me show you what you see. Okay, so this is, so we are now in Angewandte. This is, okay, some journal. Okay, this is 2013, but it doesn't matter. It's the same now. So let's suppose that, I don't know, is this paper here, right? Let's suppose that we want to ask for permission to print this figure again. Right? Let's suppose that we are one of the authors or not. We are not one of the authors. It's the same. But you want to print this figure, right? You can not take the figure and that's all. You have to request permission. You see here, request permissions. Right? Then you go. It's quite easy. You simply go there. And then they tell you, I would like to make a selection. Let's suppose reuse in another, no, in a journal or magazine. Let's suppose that I want to use a figure here. Make requestor type. So I am, what is, should be university academic, right? Is the reuse sponsored by associated with pharmaceutical? No. Oh yes, this depends. The format I want to print an electronic, because journals many times goes both. Portion, let's suppose I want a figure, just a figure. So just a figure. Number of figures, just one, for instance. Would be translated? Let's suppose no. No. Oh, no. No translation. And circulation, let's suppose that this journal circulates 5,000 issues. Let's suppose something like that. Then you can calculate the price, for instance, in euros. And they say in this case, in this particular case, they say €0. So you go here, continue, and okay, you get the permission, and that's all. So it's very easy. But depending, I mean, if maybe if you, I have not make any test, but maybe if you ask for 3 figures on one table, then maybe you have to pay €20. I don't know. Then you, with your visa, you pay what they ask for, and that's all. I don't know exactly. So in general, most of the cases you don't have to pay anything for what we do. What we do is just basically to reproduce the figure in another review or something like that. So they will not ask for money. But in some cases they can do, and it depends also in the editorial. However, what is for sure is that you cannot um, publish something that has been published before without asking for permission, even if it's your own work. Okay, the only exception is that if it is in the same journal. If it is in the same journal, then the permission is for granted because okay, it's the same editor and that's okay for them. Okay, so let's go here. Oops. Okay, and this is an example. You have it here. This was a review that we wrote in 2000, so many years ago. And you see, reprinted with permission from this reference, copyright, WLA. And this was a chemical review. So this was ACS, American Chemical Society editor. So we have to ask for this figure to be printed. At that time, I mean, we asked permission by sending letters. So this takes maybe 1 or 2 months before you get the permission. But now it's very easy. You go there, you have seen, you request permission, and it's just 1 moment. Okay, about the work of the editor. So you see that you submit the paper and what the editor does. In many cases, what they do is to screen papers for suitability. So they look if the papers are okay for the journal. And then what they do is they ask the following questions to itself, the editor. Does the paper fit into the scope of the journal? Right? If it's analytical chemistry and you send some inorganic chemistry, it does not fit, so it will be rejected immediately. Is the paper well presented with a high quality of language, logical organization of sections, figures, tables, and so on? So he looks at the paper, not probably every sentence, but some of them. Look at the figures, reference, and so on. If the quality is enough, this is solved. Does the paper fit into the main stylistic constraints of the journal? In some cases involving considerations of length. So if it's a communication, they will look if you have used only 3 or 4 pages, no more. If you use more, then it will be rejected. If they will look if you have used the format that is expected for the references in the journal. If not, it will be probably rejected. Is the paper of sufficient novelty and generic interest to readers of the journal? This is something that it will be taken into account. So this is kind of a screening before sending the paper to referees. In some cases, screening may involve a high level of rejections. Usually, these are for the journals that have very high impact factor. In these cases, the cover letter is essential. So if you are sending the paper to a journal that has a very high impact factor, try to write a nice cover letter and to convince the editor that your work is important. So if not, easily it will be rejected from the very beginning. But in some cases, in some journals, there is no screening, initial screening, simply it is sent to referees. There are several benefits of the screening. Authors do not waste their time, often waiting many months just to get the paper rejected, and then can immediately move on and submit elsewhere. So of course, it's not when you receive a rejection directly for the editor, you become angry, but there is some benefits. And the first one is this one. You do not waste waiting for many months to come with a rejection. It comes after 2 or 3 days. Probably the record is just few hours. If you submit to Journal of American Chemical Society, in some cases, you can have the paper rejected maybe just few hours, even less than 24 hours. So it's okay. I mean, it's very annoying for the one that receive the news, but it's also true that it's fast. And referees are often overburdened. I mean, referees are peers, are ourselves, let's say, and we receive many letters asking for being referee of a journal and so on, and this takes a lot of time, so they are often overburdened, and they are usually doing a voluntary job. This is voluntary, not often, it's always 100% voluntary. I do not know any referee who has get some money for doing for being referee. I mean, it's simply voluntary. During busy office hours, and so can focus only a portion of papers. So depends, but if you receive more than, let's say, 1 paper per week is probably what you can afford. More than that, then it's too much, because every paper requires at least 3 or 4 hours for reviewing process. Okay, submitting the same paper to the journal simultaneously is not acceptable. We have discussed this case that I told you before that happened here in Barcelona. And this cannot be, this is something that is not acceptable. But once it is rejected, of course, you can submit it to another journal. Okay, and this is the worst scenario. This is directly rejected by the editor. So you see, this is the manuscript. Thank you for submitting your manuscript. All manuscripts submitted to chemical science are initially evaluated. So this is the screening process by the editors to ensure they meet the essential criteria for publication in the journal. We are sorry to say that on this occasion, your paper not be considered further because it does not meet the very high novelty and general interest standard needed for publication in chemical science. Of course, this is quite subjective, but okay, it's the opinion of the editor and this cannot be changed. I mean, maybe you think that the results are enough novelty, but if they think that they are not, so it's something that you have to accept it and that's all. The editorial board are driving the journal with the mission to be top-tier international general chemistry journal that rivals the very best in chemistry. Each articles published in chemical science must be original, very high quality, and reproducible cutting-edge work which will be of exceptional significance and general interest. Yours sincerely, and that's all. This is a rejection letter that you receive after in some cases few hours, in some cases few days after you submit the paper. There is some editors, or maybe one, or in some cases several of them, that they meet and they decide which paper will be sent to referees and which not. And in this case, this one was not sent to referees. I write here, don't worry, be happy. I say that because there is an article here, if you want to take a look, and I'm not sure if this is true or not, but apparently it is. The rejection improves eventual impact of the manuscript. So you have many rejections, then the final paper has more impact than the one that will go without rejection, let's say. Yeah? So I don't know, but they have done some study. Yeah? I mean, I don't know how many papers they have looked, but it was a scientific study. Yeah? And they found that this is, okay, they make a hypothesis of why this happens, why the papers that have been rejected have better impact, so have more citations. And they say this is probably because multiple rounds of peer review. So if you have been rejected several journals, maybe you have received the comments of, I don't know, maybe it could be 4, it could be 8, it could be, I don't know, many reviewers. And because of that, there are many people that has read the paper, has made the comments. Maybe you have improved the paper by trying to answer to all these referees' comments. And in that way, you improve the paper. So this is probably one of the reasons why at the end, the manuscript that have been rejected receive more citations. Maybe they are better than the ones that are not rejected. And then there is another reason, probably this is the most important, is low impact journals, the one that have low impact, so this means the one that, I mean, are in the third or fourth quartile, the less important in our fields, will have a lower threshold for acceptance, right? So these are the ones, probably the number of papers that are rejected by these journals are lower. And this, so the ones that are accepted without rejection, many of them go to these low impact factor journals. So they are not very good. Right? And this is why they have less impact. So probably this is the main reason why papers that have received rejections, at the end, they have better impact. But okay, this is something that is discussed in this article if you want to read it. Okay, and here are some cartoons if you want to read. I found them funny. Also, there is this is Ortega y Gasset, Yo soy yo en mis circunstancias. So now it's for this científico en España is a funny, let's say Twitter. It's in Spanish, but it's a funny one, and they write among many things. There is one tweet that say, "Yo soy yo en mis rejections." So it's this. Okay, there is an academic rejection letter, so there is some comments here. Maybe you can read it and maybe have fun. And this is about the peer review. So now remember that we have sent the paper, we have submitted the paper, we have signed our copyright, so the editor has seen the paper and has considered that maybe it could be accepted in the journal. So it is sent to reviewers, right? And then the peer reviewer process started. And this is so the editors generally seek the advice of experts about manuscripts. So, and these experts are the reviewers. So the review process is this one here. So someone has results, send a paper for publications. Oh, they wrote the results, they send the paper to editor, editor send the paper to reviewers, reviewers send the comments to editor, editor send the comments to authors, and authors answer the comments. And okay, this is a kind of process that is iterative, so it can go for just once or twice or three times or whatever. So it's an iterative process, and hopefully the paper is accepted at the end or not, or it could be rejected, so it depends. Okay, and this is some history about the review process, just to tell you that already in 1833 there were reviewers at that time. So so for a long time we have had this peer review system. So now there is this look into the future. So there are some, let's say, some tendencies to change a little bit the peer review system, to modify a little bit the peer review system. But still, okay, most of the journals follow the same peer review system that we had many years ago. So, but okay, we will discuss about this later. So, this is also important. I mean, at the end, if the paper is accepted or rejected, you should blame the editor. The editor is the one that has full responsibility about the acceptance or rejection of the paper. So the recommendations of reviewer are advisory. They are just suggestions or recommendations to the editor, who accept full responsibility for decisions about the manuscripts. So final acceptance or rejections is responsibility of the editor. Review identities are confidential, and the names of the reviewers are not revealed to the authors. This is the general situation, but now some journals, they reveal the names of the reviewers if the paper is accepted, only in this case, not if it is rejected. And this is an example here. We can see this example here. This is, the journal is called Frontiers in Chemistry, right? If you publish in this journal, this is an open access journal, you have to pay. But if you publish there, then, and if the paper is accepted, then you will see which are the reviewers of the paper, which were the reviewers of the paper. So, it's here. This is a paper that, okay, actually, no, let me take the PDF. You can see the PDF file, it's here. Okay, this is a paper that was published in this Frontiers in Chemistry, and let me remember, yeah, it is here. So let me make it larger. So you see here, maybe you can see, there is edited by, who was the editor, so of course this is known always, you know which editor was the one that take care of your paper, but here you see reviewed by, so these are the two people that reviewed this paper. So this is not common. In Frontiers in Chemistry, maybe there are other journals, but there are not many. And okay, in this particular case, you know the names of the reviewers. So it's nice because, okay, then you can acknowledge them. Or thank you for the comments or something like that. I find it nice, but okay. Anyway. Okay. So maybe can continue a little bit more. So usually the editor will choose between 1 and 4 referees. So this is the usual number of referees, but it could be more even. Eh? The typical number is 2. Unless, usually it's not less than 2. But in some cases you can have 1. Maybe the editor asks 4 people, but for some reasons, I mean, they only one answer, right? And in some cases they could consider that this is enough and accept your paper or reject the paper on the basis of the opinion of this unique referee. But in most cases you have 2, right? And then I mean, the rejection, in some cases, let's suppose that if the journal is high level, maybe one of the referees says the paper can be accepted and the other one says, I don't know, a major revision or something like that, and it can be rejected by the editor, because, I mean, in order to be accepted, it should be 2 or 3 referees that are in favor of publishing the paper. So it depends. It depends on the editor also. These referees are likely to be a mixture between your recommendation, you recommended 5 to 8 referees, editorial board members, so some cases could be also referees, and anyone the editor feels active expert in the field. And this is an example that I found interesting because there were 7 anonymous reviewers. It's not common, but in this particular case, it's about economics and human biology. So they had 7 reviewers, which is quite a lot, but okay. And well, apparently the authors were happy with the reviewers because they put them in the acknowledgements. Okay, something that is also possible. Okay, so maybe we can stop today here and we can continue tomorrow from this slide. And I will give now you this control sheet and you sign. Faltaría más. Yo no sabía que había técnicos para escuchar la voz. Por eso hoy lo he hecho desde aquí, porque me parece que desde aquí no se va a lanzar. Pues yo lo que no sé exactamente yo sé que es Marta, sí, porque para fallar más de un día.
esperamos un día, puedes hacerlo personalmente por Skype, como quieras, lo dices sí, para que... Yo creo que, a ver, que los vamos a hablar una cosa de 3 minutos, pero solo para que la cosa que ya una vez me conste que habéis visto, por supuesto, sí, sí, sí. Sí, no va a ser para... Vale, sí, sí, yo lo prefiero de él. Yo lo prefiero, pero si al final uno no tiene un contrapareja, lo que sea, pero si lo prefiero, yo lo prefiero. Pues no, yo diría que estaría bien que fuera antes de que te pegas una hoja, ¿no? Antes del 14 de febrero, que momento, un día casi ningún, ¿no? De miércoles y lo máximo hasta el 14 de febrero, que era un día. Nos vemos. Dale, I have to go. I have to go to a meeting. So I will wait for you because I'm going to the hospital now. There is a meeting there. I have to go to my car. I think it was 60. I think it was. It's okay for you.
Yes.
Okay.
I have another proposal
So,
regarding the review.
yeah.
Because I was reviewed for molecular liquids, and after doing the review, I thought maybe I will read something more about the output. I should do it first, you know. And it turned out that I found the paper already published 2 months before. The exact paper. There was some changes that I think it was because of the peer reviews request. And I wrote to the editor. He rejected the paper, but few weeks later, and this is the part, he told me, he sent me an email apologizing me because he sent me wrong